Section 9 of Irish Idylls by Jane Barlow. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 9. What they saw was the figure of a man in a long greatcoat, crouched all of a heap under the bank. Near him were ranged in a row half a dozen oranges, striking up a wonderful golden glow. A small grimy scrap of paper was spread out near them, covered with several piles of shillings and pennies and a silver thimble. Besides these, Tib the cat sat severely tucked up, apparently dissatisfied and irked by the situation. At the widow's exclamation, the man raised his head and was seen to be Tom Patman, looking haggard and dazed, and as hollow-eyed as little Katie herself. Widow M'Gurk and Ody and Andy stood in a line facing him. "Whethen now, Tom Patman," said Ody, "and what might you be doin' wid yourself?" "I'm sittin' here," said Tom. "Och, musha, tell us something we don't know then. Sittin' there you are, sure enough, but what the mischief are you after, might I politely ax, or what you mean by it, at all?" "I'm sittin' here," said Tom again, "and starvin' I am. And sittin' and starvin' I'll be more betoken till the end of me ould life. Sure what else 'ud I be doin', and meself to thank for it, wid never a soul left belongin' me in the mortal world, nor a place to be goin' to?" "Well, to be sure," said Mrs. M'Gurk, "if that talk doesn't beat all that ever I heard. And himself after traipsin' off as promiscuous as an old hin that won't sit on her eggs, and leavin' his own flesh and blood behind him as if they were the dust on the road. And then he ups and gives chat about never a soul bein' left him." "'Twas Tishy, bad cess to her," said Tom. "Och, but it's the mischievous old divil skins is Tishy M'Crum. It's herself stirred up Martha, that wouldn't be too bad altogether if she'd be let alone, till the two of them had me tormented with tellin' me the old man had pots of money he'd never spend as long as he had us to be livin' on, and that we'd all do a deal better if some of us slipped away aisy widout raisin' a row, and left him for a bit, while we'd be sellin' Martha's things and seein' about gettin' into a dacint little place, instead of the whole of us to be starvin' alive up at Lisconnel. That's nothin' more than a bog bewitched, and he after lettin' us be sold up, they said, and all the while ownin' mints of money, so that we'd no call to be overly particular about leavin' him to make a shift along wid the child, if 'twas a convenience, only he'd be risin' a quare willabaloo if he knew we were goin' anywhere. Troth, I couldn't tell you the gabbin' they had day and night, and showin' me the place he kept his bag hidden in, and this way and that way. Och, bedad, themselves 'ud persuade the hair on your head it grew wrong side out, if they'd a mind to it." "They might so," said Ody. "Supposin' I was great gomerel enough to be mindin' a word they'd say, or the likes of them." In his subsequent reports of the interview, Ody always alleged that he had replied, "Aye, very belike, supposin' it grew on the head of an ass," which was certainly neater. But Ody Rafferty's repartees, like those of other people, are occasionally belated in this way. "So the ind of it was," Tom went on, "nothin' else 'ud suit them except gettin' all readied up for us to be slinkin' out in the evenin' late. Faith, I'd 20 minds in me heart agin quittin' little Katie, and she that bad. Howanever, they swore black and white that me father'd be spendin' all manner of money on her when he got us out of it, and we were to be writin' to them to come after us as soon as we were settled and everything agreeable. So I went along. But if I did, ma'am, sure when they'd got the bits of furniture sold, the only notion they had was to be settin' off to make fortins in the States, and ne'er a word about Katie and the old man. Och, they had me distracted, outrageous they were, and the old thief of the world, Tishy, allowin' me sorra a penny, so as I mightn't ha' been bound to stop where I was. But one day they thought they had me asleep in the room corner, and the two of them was colloguing away at the table, so all of a sudden Tishy whips out me poor father's bag, that I knew the look of right well, when he used to keep his baccy in it, and down she slaps it, and it jingling wid money. 'What's that for you?' says she. And the laws bless us," said Martha, "is it after takin' that you are? And what's to become of them cratures up at Lisconnel?" "Och, blathers," said Tishy, "you needn't be lettin' on you didn't well know all this while I had it. Sure, the ould one might have plinty more hittin' on us. Anyway, I left them somethin' to get along wid," says she. "The 5 shillings," said the widow. "Och, but that one's a caution." "Real hard workin' and industrious she is," observed Andy. "Them two do as well inside as out," says Tishy. "I'll just be countin' the bit of silver," says she. But bedad, I was fairly past me patience, and up I leaps, and I grabbed a hold of the little bag. Och, it's a quare fright I gave them that time, and they not thinkin' I was mindin', real terrified they were," said Tom, sitting up more erect and recalling this rare experience with evident complacency. "And leave that, you omadhawn," says Tishy, wid the look of a devil on her. "What foolery are you at now? You thievin' miscreant," says I. "It's shankin' off to the pólis I'll be, and layin' a heavy charge agin you for robbin' and stealin', and you after leavin' the child there and the old man to starve without a penny to their names," says I. "Phog," says she, "for that matter, the fever's liker to have took her off wid no trouble to be starvin', and maybe a good job too for everybody. And be this and be that," says I, "if I thought there was ever a fear of it, 'tis wringin' your ugly neck round I'd be this instinct." "Let go of that bag," says she, sweeping up some of the shillings that was spilt. "The police," says I, "and a heavy charge if there's another word out of your hijeous head." "I vow and declare," says Martha, "I believe 'twould be the cheapest thing we could do wid him to let him take it and go. Sure he'd be divil a ha'porth more use for an immigrant than the old cat there I was ape enough to bring along to pacify the childer." So then Tishy gave some more impudence, but the last end of it was we came to an agreement that I'd take the note and the silver, and they'd keep what bits of gold was in it, and they'd go off wid themselves wherever they pleased at all, and I'd tramp straight back here to be looking after the child and the old man. Ay, bedad, we settled it up civil enough, and afore I went Martha handed me out the old thimble and bid me bringin' it to Katey. "'Twas her mother's," says she. "I was keepin' for her, and thick it is wid holes be the same token, but don't say I be robbin' it off of her. And they told me to take Tib along, or else they'd be leavin' her to run wild. So I put her in the basket. Begorrah, I believe Hughie had a notion to be comin' wid me and the cat, for he was lettin' woful bawls the last thing I heard of him. So away I come wid the best of me haste. Och, I knocked the quare walkin' out of meself entirely, and I stopped at the last big place I was passin' to get Katey the oranges, and I was trampin' it all the night after, till just when there was a streak of the mornin' over the bog, I come into Lisconnel. But och, where are the roofs off the house? Och, and look at the block hole wid the rafters stickin' through it, and ne'er a breath of smoke, till me heart was sick watchin' to see what might there be an odd one, and the door clappin'. Sure, be that I well knew the child was dead, and me father quit out of it, or maybe buried himself, and I after leavin' them dyin' and starvin'. So for afraid somebody be comin' out and tellin' me, off I run away into the bog, till I was treadin' here in the cold wather. And then I tumbled the old cat out of the basket that was scrawmin' and yowlin' desperate, and I slung the basket into the stream. There's the handle among them rushes, and down I set under the bank. I don't know how many nights and days it is at all. But here I stop, never a foot I stir to be lookin' for bite or sup, or lettin' on I'm in it. and anybody may take the bit of money and welcome. I'd as lief be picking up the dirt on the road, for I'll just give me life a chance to end out of the world's misery and desolation." "Now may goodness forgive you," said the widow M'Gurk. "It's a poor case to want the wit. Troth, and yourself's the queer old child a certain mean-spirited, aisy frightened slaveen of a young bosthoon. But what sort of a contrivance is it you have on you at all, be way of a head, that you couldn't have the sense to consider the roof blowin' off of a body's house 'ud be the reason enough for them to be quittin' out of it, and no sign of dyin' in the matter? D'ye think the wind was apt to be waitin' till there happened to be nobody widin afore it got scatterin' the thatch? God help us all, you've little to do to be squattin' there talkin' about disolations and miseries, wid the two of them this instant minute sittin' be the fire up at my place, and sorra a hand's turned ailin' them, forby Katey's a trifle contrary now and agin, though not bein' entirely strong yet. And bedad at that hearin' reports of the occurrence used to proceed from this point, the lep he gathered himself up with, and the rate he legged it off, musha he was over the hill while we were pickin' up his things for him. And as for the old cat that he tipped over, it rolled a perch of ground before it got a hold of its 4 feet. Sure we were sittin' there as quite as could be consaved." The conclusion of this precipitate rush was thus recounted, when all of a sudden we couldn't tell what came bouncing in at the door, as if it had been shot out of the ends of the earth, and had us all jumping up and screeching, till we seen it was only Tom Patman, and he in such a taking you might suppose he thought something 'ud swallow up old Joe and the child on him before he could get at them. Lisconnel's opinion was divided as to whether Tom would actually have stayed and starved in his hiding place had he not been discovered. Mrs. M'Gurk thought it likely enough. The cat going back and forwards that way, she said, gave her an idea there was something amiss in it, and that was why she took Andy along. 'Deed, and she got a quare turn when first she spied the chap crouchin' under the bank. She couldn't tell but he might ha' been a corpse. Brian Kilfoyle's view was, devil a much. Sure if he'd had e'er a notion to be doin' anything agin himself, there was plenty of deep bog holes handy for him to sling himself into and have done with it. Whereupon Mrs. Sheridan crossed herself deprecatingly and said, "Ah, sure, belike the creature wouldn't have the wickedness in him to go do such a thing. Her husband didn't know but he might. Them soft sort of fellers 'ud sometimes stick to anything they took into their heads, the same as a dab of mortar agin a wall." And Ody Rafferty supposed the fact of the matter was that if be any odd chanced they got a notion of their own, they mistook it for somebody else's. On one point, however, the neighbours, Mrs. M'Gurk not excepted, were practically unanimous: the utter flagitiousness, namely, of Tishy M'Crum. There was a tendency to begrudge her the trivial merit of having voluntarily left behind her the 5-shilling piece, as this marred that perfect symmetry of iniquity which is so pleasant to the eye when displayed by people of whom we have no opinion. Only Mrs. Bryan said it was a mercy she had that much good nature in herself, but even she added that the fewer of them kind of folk she saw comin' about the place, the better she'd be pleased, and she hoped they'd got shut of them for good and all. This aspiration seemed the more likely to be fulfilled when, within a week or so, the Patmans heard from the family of Tom's first wife, who held out prospects of work for himself and a home for his father and Katey, an offer which was gladly accepted. Their departure left at the single trace of their sojourn in Lisconnel Tib the cat, which remained behind, a somewhat unwelcome bequest to the widow M'Gurk. Indeed, I fear the creature became a source of some annoyance to her, because Andy Sheridan contracted a habit of addressing it by the name of Tishy, and bestowing upon it the same laudatory epithets with which the widow had been wont to justify her admiration for the energetic sisters. It was on a hushed February morning that the Patmans finally departed. The smell of spring was in the air, and filmy silvery mist had begun to float off the dark bogland in vanishing wreaths, soft and dim as the frail sloe blossom already stolen out over the withen black branches up on the ridge. A jewel had been left in the heart of every groundling trefoil and clover leaf, and the long rays that twinkled to them were still just tinged with rose. Here and there a flake of gold seemed to have lit upon the clump of sombre green furze bushes, by which neighbours in a small knot stood watching the 3 generations of Patmans dwindle away down the road with its narrow dewy grass border threading the vast sweep of sky-rimmed brown. Father and son walked while little Katty bobbed along balanced in a swaying donkey pannier. The widow M'Gurk, who felt a good deal of concern about the destiny of her late lodgers, hoped they were going to dacent people, for there wasn't as much sense among the 3 of them as you'd put on a 4-penny bit. And Mrs. Quigley thought 'twould be hard to say which, the young man or the old one, was the foolishest. For the blathers old Joe talked about Tom, and the gabby Tom made of himself over the child now that he had his own way with her was past belief. "And I can tell you," said Ody Rafferty, "there's folks going about that you'll want all the wits you ever had, and maybe something tacked on, to get the better of rightly. Och, I question will they ever do any great things, goodness help them," said Mrs. Sheridan. "'Twill be much if he keeps them outside the house." "Well, anyway," said Biddy Ryan, "I'd liefer be in their coats, fortin or no fortin, than like them 2 ugly tempered women settin' off to the dear knows where after robbin' and plunderin' all before them." "True for you then, Biddy," said Mrs. Brian, turning away from her wide outlook. "We're none so badly off when we're stoppin' where we are, instead of streelin' about wid the notion of such villanies in our minds. For sure enough," she said as she faced round towards the grey peaked end walls and russet thatch of Lisconnel, "the world's a quare place to get travellin' through, take it as you will." End of section 9. Recording by James Carson. End of Irish Idylls by Jane Barlow.